So the UFC is going to be back in front of an arena in Mexico at Elevation, and this honestly is going to be a pretty solid card, and it's a card that I feel a lot better about than how I felt about UFC London. I had a bad feeling about UFC London, and that bad feeling did kind of get proven true. I thought it was a very tough card to make the picks on, a very tough card to make the bets on, although I didn't actually bet on that card at all. That card just kind of, I think it really hurt a lot of people, and it definitely did hurt me, so unfortunately it's going to be upset Artem in here talking about UFC Fight Night Moreno versus Erceg. However, I think it could be a little bit of an upgrade from Angry Angelo that you got on his breakdown of the UFC Mexico card, because I did watch that one, and you guys have been hurting Angelo. What have you guys been saying to him, man? Like, he was just a little bit more angry than usual, and you only got a 10-minute intro out of him this time, so I can no longer justify having a 3 or 4 minute intro anymore if Angelo's going to start cutting them down to only 10 minutes. However, let's talk about this card just kind of overall. I do want to point out one thing though before we even get into it. I do not understand this year why all of a sudden now the odds of the fights have just gotten so wide. Some of my more confident picks on the card are now no longer minus 250 favorites, minus 300 favorites. They're minus 600 favorites, minus 800 favorites. Since when in the UFC, and maybe let me know if I'm wrong, have we consistently had this many massive favorites? Like UFC London had, I believe, like 4 or 5 fighters that were like minus 400 or wider on that card. I know um, Jordan Vasinic was minus 400. You know, there are like, I mean, it's just kind of nuts how the odds are working right now, how wide these favorites are getting. And I think there's a couple of guys on this card as well that are really going to have to fight for your money to pay for their price tag, especially at Elevation. But of course, the lock of the week won again last week. Shout out to Jacob. Unfortunately, Jordan Vasinic cooked Angelo's safety parlay. But the slam of the week one for BetSam on WeWantPicks.com. And if you do sign up, of course, $10 per month. I've been doing pretty well with Cage Warriors. Last weekend, I picked a perfect Cage Warriors card, which was pretty awesome, and LFA is taking place this weekend. If you sign up, use the code ARTEM, and the Discord is free to join. And there are like 8,000 people in that Discord. That's a 2.5 minute intro. Let's go. Austin Hubbard versus MarQuel Mederos is going to start us out. Now, it's always going to be a little bit tough to pick someone that is coming into the UFC. Now, he did just beat Lennon Quinonez, but of course, this is the second fight in the promotion. Now coming in there against a veteran, a UFC veteran 2 times now in Austin Hubbard, and a guy who I do think genuinely has proven to have pretty good cardio, and it could be due to this situation that he's got going on here with the gym. I'm not too sure if he's still at Elevation, but definitely Austin Hubbard, I would say, over the years, you could say is a very gritty guy at 155 pounds that can push a pace over 3 rounds. Hubbard is a pretty decent wrestler, but I do think that he does have some holes in his striking, which I think that MarQuel Mederos could actually exploit here. I think Mederos, from what we've seen so far, very fast hands, very high volume guy, can push a pace if he needs to, can wrestle if he needs to, but I personally would just see him as a striker. Of course, come into the Contender Series and got a massive win in the first round over Isa Azakov, who, if you look into the tape of Isa Azakov, genuinely has got pretty solid wrestling and is a pretty good win for Mederos to have on his record. And I would say maybe somewhat similar to this Hubbard matchup. I think it's going to be a little bit of a test for Mederos, though. Hubbard's a very tough guy. Mederos is going to be, like, I think just a little bit smaller in the cage there, but I think that he's going to be the more athletic, the more fast guy. I think that he does go out there and get it done against Hubbard. I'm actually going to be picking Mederos by knockout in this one. I know how I was just talking about how tough Hubbard is, but I think Mederos can go out there and land some pretty big shots and wear down on Austin Hubbard. Now Jamall Emmers is fighting against Gabriel Miranda. I can tell you that Jamall Emmers is not minus 220 right now. He is minus 350. And honestly, on Fight Night, you could see Jamall Emmers like minus 400, maybe minus 500. I do know right now, at the time of me recording, the over-under line is set at 2.5. And I think the under 2.5 on this fight is minus 110. And no matter who you're picking on this fight, I think we can both agree that that line is probably incorrect. Because I think that Jamall Emmers is going to knock out Gabriel Miranda. But if you're picking Gabriel Miranda, you're probably picking him to win by submission in the, first round? Second round at the latest. And I do think that in this matchup, we are going to see Emmers go out there and get that KO. Miranda's whole career, is a little bit sketchy. This is where Tapology is quite good, where I can go through and I can say quite a few of these wins here, especially the wins for the Face the Danger promotion, are going to have a very big asterisk on them. He did somehow manage to beat Shane Young, who is from New Zealand and who I did pick to win against Gabriel Miranda, and I saw that fight live actually. I was actually there in the arena when it happened, but yeah, I think Jamall Emmers here, Emmers isn't a super high volume guy. He's not even really a guy that you would just pick to win by KO all the time. But in this one here, we know that Miranda just doesn't have very good striking. We know he is a very tough guy, but we just saw him get slept by old mate Charrier, and we did see him get slept again after taking an absolute beating by Benoit Saint Denis. I think that we can see Emmers just kind of be the much better striker in this matchup. Miranda, he is pretty slippery in the BJJ, but his takedowns aren't that great, and I think that Emmers has decent enough grappling in his own right to not get caught into a silly submission like that. So I think Emmers keeps it on the feet. I think he lands the better shots. I think he does find the knockout here. And it does go under 2.5 rounds, I think, is actually the pick there, if it still is the line right now. This is another one here, Rafa Garcia versus Vinc Pichel. I don't think Rafa Garcia has done anything to prove that he should be a minus 500 favorite in this matchup against Pichel, and just to confirm, he is still minus 500 on some of the biggest sports books out there. I don't think he's worth putting in your parlays at minus 500, man. This is a fight that's going to go the distance, in my opinion. I don't see Rafa Garcia going out there and finishing Vinc Pichel. I don't see Vinc Pichel going out there and finishing Rafa Garcia. And it's really just going to be a 3-round war at elevation and like what is going to be a pretty high pace, because both of these guys, mostly Rafa Garcia, do set pretty high paces. Garcia is a boxer wrestler, and that's about it. He wants to box to close the distance to then get takedowns. However, his takedowns aren't actually that great, and he just got absolutely demolished by Grant Dawson only 5 months ago now, and he's coming in there against Pichel, who can push a pace in his own right. Pichel, now 42 years old, did lose to Ismail Bonfim, but to be fair, did give Bonfim a pretty tough test in that matchup. Before that, did lose to Mark Madsen, but to be fair, Mark Madsen is a Greco-Roman silver medalist in the Olympics, and before that was on a pretty good win streak himself in that win over Jim Miller, whereas it has aged quite well. I do think, though, in this matchup, I think Vinc Pichel is going to need to get the takedowns pretty often to win this matchup. And despite Garcia getting out-wrestled recently by Grant Dawson is a guy that has proven right now to be a top 10 guy at lightweight. And I think now at this point, 42-year-old Vinc Pichel isn't going to match that. So I do think that Rafa Garcia can go out there. I think he can land more volume on the feet over the 3 rounds. And if he needs to, maybe get his own takedowns. But I'm going to pick Garcia to win this one in the striking, because I think that's where he's going to get it done over Pichel. But I think it's going to be a 3-round matchup, a decision at elevation, minus 500. I mean, that's just nuts. That's exactly what I was talking about in the intro. I don't understand how this is happening. Julia Polastri now goes out there against Lupita Godinez. Lupita Godinez, probably the worst fight IQ on the roster, and I'm genuinely not kidding when I say that. She has a lot of potential to just not do what she does and lose. She is a very good wrestler. I believe her sister is an Olympian now and represented Mexico, or maybe it was the USA, I believe it was Mexico, in wrestling in the Olympics recently. And you see that even in Godinez's own wrestling, how good she is, despite her sister's accomplishments I just brought up. Godinez is a good wrestler, and her boxing and her striking is pretty good. She was looking good against Shandaroba, and then she decided to lose. She was looking good against Angela Hill, I thought, in the first round, and then she just chose to lose by not shooting any more takedowns. I don't understand Lupita Godinez. I feel like she just chooses to not win fights. I feel like she just doesn't care enough about her career to actively try and win fights. But this is a big step down in competition for her, and she should be able to beat Julia Polastri. Julia Polastri's one loss came to Josephine Knudsen, who is actually a fighter at one point I was very high on, and I thought Josephine Knudsen could have become something, but maybe not, man, I don't know. But then she did go out there and beat Corey McKenna, but that was a close fight, and Lupita Godinez kind of fights like Corey McKenna, but is better. Godinez in this matchup, in my opinion, should look to wrestle. I think that if she does wrestle, she can get the takedowns against Polastri. We have seen Polastri get taken down before. I think that Godinez should be able to do that and get the control in her own right. But you know what? If you watch that Angela Hill fight, what does Lupita Godinez do? She attempts a takedown in round 1. she gets it, but she doesn't get a lot of control, and then she just chooses to not get a takedown for the rest of the fight, and just chooses to lose a striking matchup against Angela Hill. I think this is a similar matchup. If Lupita Godinez just chooses to not wrestle, Polastri, I know Polastri's a good grappler. Polastri's a pretty good striker as well. I know she did just get tuned up by Josephine Knudsen in that matchup, but don't get me wrong, Polastri does have talent on the feet. She could probably beat Godinez in a striking matchup. So it's really up to like whether or not Godinez just wants to win the fight. It's about as simple as that, to be honest with you. But I am going to pick Lupita Godinez to win. Now, Melquizael Costa fights against Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez, I guess the enemy of every single prospect at 135 and 145 pounds. This guy has turned away so many prospects, but somehow managed to lose to Julian Erosa. Who knows how that happened, but if we're going to quickly recap Rodriguez's career, he's turned away some of the better prospects at 135, missed weight in that matchup, went up to 145 against Bulgarian. In my opinion, I thought he lost that fight. To be fair, I thought he lost it pretty clearly, but he got the decision. And then he got, in my opinion, a step down in competition, kind of just based on his skill set against Rosa. He got subbed in that matchup, and then had a pretty close matchup against Austin Bashi. And in that matchup against Austin Bashi, I said that Bashi is too small for 145 pounds. And you guys went nuts at me in the comments below, and guess what? Bashi is proven to be too small at 145 pounds. Look how small he looked against Christian Rodriguez, who was a former bantamweight that just ate too many pizzas on fight week and couldn't make 135. Melquizael Costa. This guy's a pretty big guy for this weight class at 145. He did come in on short notice to get his UFC contract to 155 against Thiago Moises. And since then, he did take a bit of a beating by Steve Garcia, but he's on a pretty nice win streak right now. And one of those wins did come as an underdog against Andre Fili. And, call me crazy. Call me crazy. I'm picking Melquizael Costa to win this matchup against Christian Rodriguez. I really like Melquizael Costa's striking, man. I know that Christian Rodriguez is a solid boxer. He absolutely tuned up, where is it? He tuned up Cameron Saimon on the feet in the boxing, but he absolutely tuned up Raul Rosas Jr. in the boxing, tuned up Austin Bashi in the boxing. Bashi isn't a very good striker. He's a good enough striker to get the takedowns going, but if he can't get the takedowns against a much bigger opponent, he's not really going to be able to offer too much. I think in this matchup, though, I think Costa genuinely, with his shooter box style, I know he's not, I don't think he's part of, Charles Oliveira's shooter box gym, but he definitely does have the shooter box Muay Thai style, where he's very, very aggressive with the Muay Thai, with the kicks, with the punches, with the knees, and I think that the striking, he can go out there and get it done against C-Rod, and I think if he wants to, I think the takedowns could be there as well. We've seen Costa in the past, I will admit, we've seen Costa lose decisions by getting out-grappled before. I believe it was this matchup against Atalo Gomes, which I watched on the LFA, and I think in that matchup he was taken down and controlled for quite a bit. Same thing against Thiago Moises. Steve Garcia kind of did it to him in moments too, but I just don't think Christian Rodriguez is that kind of just same sort of fighter that's just going to take him down and control him. So I think that Costa on the feet is going to be more active. I think he's going to be more aggressive. The one thing, though, that you've got to point out is in the past, Christian Rodriguez has won fights based on cardio. Now, I don't think it was cardio alone that won this fight against Rosas Jr. It was definitely part of the takedown defense that he does possess. But in this matchup against Rosas Jr., Rosas come out there super, super aggressive in round one, completely gassed out from having to try and get takedowns against Rodriguez, and then Rodriguez outlasted him in round 2 and 3. This fight is at elevation. We've seen Christian Rodriguez prove to be a really good cardio guy, a guy with a lot of cardio, so maybe he can outlast Melquizael Costa in this matchup, but just kind of based on the skill set that both of these guys possess, I do like Costa in this matchup with the striking, and I think that he does go out there and get it done against Christian Rodriguez. Ateba Gautier versus Jose Medina. Ateba Gautier, another very big favorite here. I think the odds are changing just a little bit on him. He's minus 420. Definitely was minus 550 at one point, but I'm quite confident that Ateba Gautier does win this fight, but there are a lot of red flags out there that I do need to just kind of mention really quickly. But the reason why I think Ateba Gautier is such a very confident pick for me is because I do look at Jose Medina, and I just can't come up with a winning condition for him. The thing about a lot of fights, and even fights in the past where the odds are super wide, you can come up with reasons why the opponent would have an opportunity to win. The problem with Jose Medina is I genuinely don't think that he has a winning condition. even against someone like Ateba Gautier, who does have a lot of flaws. If you watch Jose Medina's fights, because this is what I did when I was looking into him before going into the Contender Series, I think it was a couple of these fights I couldn't find, but I believe it was this matchup here I was able to find on YouTube. He was struggling to get takedowns on very, very low-level guys in the regional scene over in South America. I believe a lot of these fights would have taken place, and he just loses, you know, like he takes a lot of damage and he's got a crazy chin. Zacharias was landing some absolute bombs on him. Magomed Gaziaslov wasn't landing bombs on him, but he was landing good shots. And he just kind of takes this damage. He just doesn't get knocked out, which is pretty cool. But, you know, you've got to be able to win somehow. And the way that I think Medina has won all of his fights in the past is by getting takedowns. And Ateba Gautier, I do need to point this out, has shown, where is it? I think it was his one loss, shown a takedown weakness before. You can watch this fight on YouTube against Glenn Williams. He starts out very strong, and then he just completely gasses out, and Glenn Williams takes him down pretty easily without really any problems whatsoever. And I will say it was this matchup against Glenn Williams, which is why I did pick Uranaito, the king of Pancrase at the time, to defeat him. And against Uranaito was just shooting takedowns from the opposite side of the cage, and Gautier was able to defend them somewhat easily, eventually knocking out Uranaito, who was just kind of like a short, fat middleweight. But it is what it is. That was just a bad pick by me, but it was really based on that Glenn Williams fight where he did gas out and he did show bad takedown defense. Now he's 23 years old. Thank God he's still older than me, man. Soon I'm gonna be Uncle Artem with guys fighting in the UFC that are younger than me. But right now, still quite a lot of guys out there that are older. But I think Gautier, I mean, you just look at it. 6'4", 81-inch reach, possesses a lot of power in those hands. And I think against Medina, man, like, I think you can knock out Medina as the pick. The problem is, though, if Gautier just goes out there like an absolute madman in the first round and just heavily gasses out, the fight could get interesting and maybe hilarious, but I think that Gautier is going to get it done before that. I think he does knock out Medina. I know Medina's proven to be tough. Zacharias, though, Zacharias hit very, very hard, but Reese was going for takedowns and just making really weird decisions in that matchup, and I think that Gautier can just kind of, if he hurts Medina, I think he's going to get a bit more aggressive and he's going to go after him a bit. So I do like Gautier to win this matchup, and I like him to win this matchup by knockout. Edgar Chairez now fights against CJ Vergara. I was thinking about this matchup and why they made it, and I think I've kind of come to the conclusion. I think the UFC wants CJ Vergara gone because he's missed weight so many times and he's still fighting at 125 pounds. He of course had that kind of crazy fight against Daniel Lacerda, where Lacerda hurt him early and then he was just running around, and eventually Lacerda gassed out and he took over and won that fight. And then after that, you know, he beat Vinicius Salvador, who was one of the Amanda Ribas training guys. Turned out to really just not be that great, I'll be honest. And then he's got two pretty bad matchups back to back, and now I would say that Edgar Chairez isn't really a bad matchup for CJ Vergara. Edgar Chairez is a massive guy for this weight class at 125 pounds. He is huge. He does have pretty good boxing. His BJJ is pretty slick as well, and that is where he's going to get a lot of his best work done, is in that wrestling and in that grappling. And honestly, against CJ Vergara, we've seen CJ Vergara out-wrestled before. I know that's how he's managed to get wins in the past. Against Clayton Rodriguez, he was able to edge out a very close decision, and I believe that probably was due to a couple of takedowns he was getting later on in the fight. But I think against Edgar Chairez is slick. He's got like pretty solid grappling off his back. We saw that against Tatsuro Taira on short notice. He's got pretty good grappling when he's in control as well, even against Clayton Carpenter. The fight against Clayton Carpenter, and Clayton Carpenter's proven to be a pretty good prospect now. I know we just got turned away by Ulanbekov, but on the Contender Series, we saw Chairez find some success using his size, using his bullying kind of ability to even get a takedown in that matchup. I think we can see Chairez just go out there against Vergara, get the fight down to the ground, work for a submission, using that size, using that length that he is going to have. However, minus 265, pretty nuts, because I know that Chairez has a very, very tough weight cut, and a minus 300 favorite at elevation with a very tough weight cut. I don't really see it going amazingly, but I am still going to pick Chairez to win this matchup. I think he does get it done against CJ Vergara. Now, Ronaldo Rodriguez fights against Kevin Borjas. I think a lot of people are trying to fade Ronaldo Rodriguez in this spot. And I will be honest with you guys, there is going to be a time to fade Ronaldo Rodriguez, whatever his name is. but I don't think it's right now, man. However, literally every performance that we've seen from him recently has been quite bad. He did go in there against short notice against Dennis Bondar. I actually picked Dennis Bondar to win this matchup, and then I did pick, I think I picked Odie Osborne to beat Luis Rodriguez as well. So I'm actually 0-2 on Luis Rodriguez picks, but you got to hear me out here. On the regional scene, I thought he looked very bad. He was having close fights against guys that weren't that good. Dennis Bondar, not a very well-known striker. Dennis Bondar got absolutely tuned up by another flyweight, Carlos Hernandez. Carlos Hernandez absolutely tuned up Bondar on the feet. But I still saw Bondar go out there against Ronaldo Rodriguez. He would throw a jab. Ronaldo Rodriguez would not react to that jab until the shot had actually already landed. That is how slow Luis Rodriguez is at 125 pounds. This guy is probably the slowest flyweight we've ever seen step into the UFC octagon. And the same sort of thing against Odie Osborne. I thought he was kind of given a decision there. I thought he lost that fight. I think a lot of people thought he lost that fight. Luis Rodriguez, he's a boxer. He can grapple kind of, but he just mostly wants to strike. And honestly, everything we've seen from him so far, it has kind of given, you've got to fade this guy at some point kind of vibes. However, I don't think it's against Kevin Borjas. Kevin Borjas, I will just kind of put my hand up and say it. I've said it about him when I'm talking about guys that have beaten him before, like Josh Van. Kevin Borjas is the worst striker at 125 pounds right now. I know that he did give Josh Van some trouble, but because he gave Josh Van some trouble, that made me think that Josh Van isn't all that, because Kevin Borjas was able to give him some trouble. Borjas genuinely is not a good striker, like, whatsoever. This guy's at 125 pounds, the most technical division in the UFC, without any technique at all. I do think that Rodriguez, is going to be a little bit slower. He's going to be slower than everyone in this weight class, but I think if he just was able to get by Odie Osborne, who I think is a more technical, faster Borjas, he should be able to get by Kevin Borjas himself, and he can get takedowns as well. Borjas doesn't really have too much wrestling and grappling. Luis Rodriguez does, at least. I think that Luis Rodriguez goes out there and wins a decision, but I think eventually the time is going to come and the fade of Luis Rodriguez is going to be there. I think a lot of people are either doing two things. They're either betting on Borjas as the underdog, trying to fade Rodriguez now, or they're betting on Rodriguez now because, honestly, every other fight on this card, the odds are just too wide, so minus 150 at this point doesn't look like a bad bet, but I don't know about this one, guys. I'm not that confident. And now, speaking of confident, David Martinez takes on Saimon Oliveira. I feel good about this one, man. Unless Saimon Oliveira has made some really big improvements in the last, year and 2 years it's been now, he's not beating David Martinez, man. David Martinez, genuinely, out of the Contender Series, is one of the best prospects to come out of that show last year. He's a massive favorite, but I honestly think for good reason. What is he, minus 400? Pretty wide, honestly getting too wide now. This is what I'm saying. Where are these minus 400 favorites coming at from? I swear, right? Hear me out. If this fight was 2 years ago, David Martinez would be minus 250, right? Something like that, I swear. But David Martinez, this guy's good. I think he is a little bit small for 135 pounds. However, it's kind of an awkward sort of size because I think he'd be too big to make 125. But his striking is so sick, man. His striking's really slick. He does throw, in my opinion, for me, too many spinning kicks. It is something that he does have in his arsenal, and he throws too much of, which I don't really love to see in the UFC because you can just kind of get those caught and get taken down. However, if you are Mauricio Rufy, you can get some pretty sick highlight KOs from, and I think David Martinez also has a pretty sick spinning heel kick here. I think it was this one here. One of these ones on Combat here, it was a pretty cool highlight, but David Martinez, very slick, high-volume striker, does set a pretty good pace on the feet, does have a very good arsenal of different strikes, and he's taking on Saimon Oliveira, who just isn't a good striker, man. This guy's a guillotine merchant. I think he's got 11 wins by sub. I think most of these are by guillotine choke. It's kind of insane how he's managed to do it, to be honest with you, and yeah, he lost to the wrestler Gravely, and then he got smoked by Daniel Marcos. I don't know, man. I think this is going to be a little bit of a repeat of the Daniel Marcos fight. I think Martinez has got this on the feet. I think he's going to look good. I think he's going to look controlled. I think he's going to land whatever he throws. And if he just kind of stays away from Saimon Oliveira, as Oliveira does actually attempt guillotines in the clinch, which is quite interesting. I think as long as David Martinez keeps this at range, he's going to be chilling. And I think he does eventually knock out Saimon Oliveira. Now Rosas Jr. takes on Vince Morales. In my opinion, this is a good matchup for Rosas Jr. I think I've seen some people try and kind of go with the Vince Morales side, but as soon as this fight was booked, in my head I thought to myself, yeah, the UFC's given him a good matchup here, because Vince Morales is a guy that does have very good wrestling, does have very good cardio, but from what we've seen recently, man, especially in his last fight, I think we just kind of just see a very, very big lack of aggressiveness from his part. Just kind of like a lack of that kind of like, I don't know what the word would be, I guess that X factor, that ability to go out there and just kind of get the finish and just kind of be aggressive. We saw that against Taylor Lapalus. I mean, he gave Lapalus a somewhat good fight considering how short notice it was. Turned around pretty quickly against Elijah Smith. I picked Morales as the underdog there. I think Elijah Smith was actually Bet Sam's one of most confident picks. And Smith showed like pretty good wrestling against Morales. Elijah Smith was able to take down and control Morales, and I did not expect that to happen because from a lot of the tape study that I had seen from Smith, Smith was just really controlled in the striking. And honestly, that performance from Morales really did disappoint me. And I think now going in there against Rosas Jr., we know what Rosas Jr. wants to do. Rosas Jr.'s striking is not amazing. He wants to go out there, he wants to get the takedown and get that grappling going. If Morales can get taken down by Elijah Smith, I think he can get taken down by Rosas Jr. I think this is a good matchup for Rosas. I think this is a setup fight for Rosas, honestly. And I think that Rosas can go out there and get it done. Of course, he lost to C-Rod, but since then, they gave him a pretty tough, pretty few close ones. But Archie Lung, I will give Archie Lung some credit. You know, defended a couple of takedowns and did land some pretty good shots on Rosas Jr. But I think that, yeah, I just don't think Morales can do it to Rosas. So I think that Rosas goes out there and gets it done, to be honest, in this matchup. Now, Kelvin Gastelum moves back up to 185 pounds against Joe Pyfer. Not really sure why, to be honest with you. I have been talking about Gastelum at 185 for years and how he should be at 170. He moves down to 170. He loses to Sean Brady, who has just proven and just smoked Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards, get some help. What was that? I mean, honestly, at least it makes me feel better about my JDM pick against Bilal Muhammad. That Brady was able to be like more dominant than Bilal was in that matchup. But yeah, that was a bit sad. And before that, of course, Brady beat Gastelum. Gastelum, you lost to like the top 3, top 4, top 5 best welterweight on the planet right now. And then you beat D-Rod, who's a borderline top 15 guy. And then you just give up, and now you're back at 185. I mean, Gastelum, I genuinely believe it when I say this. I'm not gonna say it. I just genuinely believe that they're like there's something's up with Gastelum. Where like he just refuses to like try and fight lower than 185 pounds. I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna keep it there. However, I think he just gets smoked by Joe Pyfer. I mean, Gastelum at this point, and I think Bitsam himself has said it before, and I'm gonna say it too. I think Gastelum at this point is just holding on to that Adesanya performance in 2019. This is 6 years ago, man. And this Gastelum that fought Adesanya and was able to push a very heavy 5 rounds against him, this guy doesn't exist anymore, you know? This was in 2019. This was 6 years ago. I was like 15 years old at this point, maybe 16 years old when that fight happened. I think I was 15. Literally 15 years old. I probably didn't even really like know anyone else aside from Adesanya at that point when I was watching MMA. And of course my boy Dan Hooker. I love Dan Hooker. But like what are we doing? Like, this guy doesn't exist anymore. He doesn't. And I feel like he's still holding on to that. Just go down to 170. You showed that you can do it. I mean, I know that he did fight D-Rod on short notice. I think that was up the weight class. But anyway, Joe Pyfer took a pretty bad loss. And it was pretty unfortunate to see against Hermanson. But Hermanson, I guess, at this point is kind of just the guy that turns away everybody. He's like the C-Rod of 185. Smoked Marc-Andre Barriol. I think he can go out there and just beat up Gastelum, man. Like Gastelum, he just doesn't look good anymore. He genuinely looks like every time he fights, he's getting worse. Every time he fights at 185, it looks like he's been eating more pizzas during his like time, like fight camp or whatever. I think Joe Pyfer, man, like if he stays patient in here at elevation, I think he can find the chin of Gastelum. I do genuinely believe that he can knock out Kelvin Gastelum. So I'm gonna pick Pyfer, picking Pyfer by KO. All I'll say is the odds makers have made him a minus 340 favorite, not minus 550, minus 340 favorite for a reason. He's going to have the size advantage like literally every single one of Gastelum's opponents have. It's just a 6'2" guy with crazy athleticism and power, taking on a 5'9" guy, still holding on to a performance from 2019. I'm going to go with Pyfer. I think Pyfer can knock him out. I almost skipped the co-main event there. I almost skipped the Drew Dober show against Manuel Torres because, once again, like, call me crazy, but I am going to pick Drew Dober to win this matchup. I think that this is actually going to be a pretty tough test for Manuel Torres. Manuel Torres has had a couple fights now in the UFC with a loss where he has looked pretty good, you know, against Nicholas Motta. Absolutely smoked Nicholas Motta. I can't believe Motta's still alive after that elbow landed on him. And then he beat Chris Duncan, submitted Chris Duncan actually after a bit of a war, and then did get caught by Bahamondes. And in that matchup, I'll be honest, a lot of his flaws were exposed there, but thankfully I did pick Bahamondes there, so I didn't look like too much of a fool. But this is a fight which I could look like a fool in, because Drew Dober, I've always kind of thought that Drew Dober has a good chin, because he has. And he had a very good chin. He's only been knocked out 3 times now in his career, despite quite a few losses. The loss to Silva was a doctor stoppage. But you do need to look at a couple of pretty sketchy moments. Renato Moicano did knock him down. You don't really like seeing that too much. And I think kind of from there, he did get smoked by Matt Frivola, who I believe probably has to retire after this loss to Farisi. That was kind of crazy. But anyway, Drew Dober. He can take hits. Now, the chin ain't the same. It ain't the same as it used to be, let's be honest. However, he can take hits and he can push a pace if he needs to. And I think that's going to be the secret to defeating Manuel Torres in this matchup. Manuel Torres, he is a guy that I genuinely believe just fully relies on his power in his fights. I don't think he is the most technical striker in the world, despite having a very strong arsenal of strikes. You know, this guy just doesn't box. He doesn't just throw kicks. He does have a lot of tools there. He can throw from anywhere. But I do think that he just relies on power too much. And if you rely on your power too much, I think that you can gas out in this fight at elevation. I think that Drew Dober can push the pace. We've seen that Drew Dober can go up there, take some hits, and land combinations. And I think combinations, and especially loading up and investing in the body, is going to be Drew Dober's secret to success here. We have seen Dober get out-wrestled before by Brad Riddell, but I do believe that if he wants to go offensive in the wrestling, I think he probably could go out there and do it in this matchup against Torres, especially if it is just to slow Torres down, because as I said, I think he does just rely on power too much. So I'm going to go Dober. I'm picking Dober to win this one. Do I think that at this point in his career, Dober can eat Torres' best shots? No, to be honest with you, because Torres, he does have unreal power at 155. But I do think that Dober is a guy that can land more volume, can maybe just try and wear on Torres going into the second round, and then find a finish late in this matchup. So I think Dober gets it done against Torres. I think it's going to be a war. I mean, it's going to be one of those ones where I'm going to be very nervous for my boy Drew Dober, but I think that it's going to be a pretty good matchup, and I think someone's going to get knocked out. I'm going to be picking Dober to win it, though. Now we got Moreno versus Steve Erceg. I'll be honest with you guys, I cannot pick against Moreno after seeing that performance against Amir Albazi. Now, I feel like looking back at this matchup now, at the time I thought that this was an incredible Brandon Moreno performance, because it was, but now looking back on it and giving a little bit of time to reflect, it was also Amir Albazi just accepting defeat and choosing to lose and just not doing what he's good at, which is wrestling. So, on one hand, I do kind of look at it as, oh wow, Brandon Moreno absolutely tuned up Amir Albazi for 3 rounds. But also at the same time, we saw a short notice Costa do that to Amir Albazi in the first round. I forgot his first name. Alessandro Costa. If you guys remember this fight, Alessandro Costa was tuning up Amir Albazi in the first round, and that was a short notice fight for Costa. He took it on like 5 days notice, which was insanity. So although Moreno looked incredible and absolutely styled on Albazi, we do know that Albazi's striking just isn't that amazing, and he just decided to not wrestle after the first round and gave up. But I think this is a good matchup for Moreno as well. Now, I do like Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg's path to the UFC, path to the title, is quite cool. He was able to get a title shot pretty early on in his career. Mostly, I would genuinely say due to just the fact that Alejandro Pantoja has just cleaned out the division at this point. I don't think that there's really anyone in the top 15 that Pantoja hasn't beaten yet, either in the UFC as the champion or before becoming the champion. Askar Askarov, come back. We need you. But yeah, I think that Steve Erceg, I picked him to beat Kai Kara France. He got caught by a right cross, got knocked out, but aside from that, he beat Alessandro Costa, who I was just talking about, and how Costa was tuning up Albazi. And honestly, let's be real about that fight too. That was a short notice fight for Costa, And Costa hurt Steve Erceg in moments. Now, we didn't hurt him, like, he didn't have him rocked, but he did land some shots that definitely demanded the attention of Steve Erceg, though, of course. And I think that now, we're looking to this matchup against Moreno, we're going to see a pretty good matchup, because Steve Erceg, he is primarily a grappler. I know in the UFC, we've seen a lot of boxing, and just a lot of stand-up out of Erceg mostly, but what really got him to the party, what got him into the UFC was the fact that he can very goodly grapple. And we've seen Moreno lose in that way before, you know, that is actually how Moreno lost to Pantoja in their third fight, and also the second fight, and the first one. But anyway, we move on from that. Moreno, like, I think that Moreno genuinely does have some pretty good boxing at 125 pounds. Probably is the best boxing at 125 right now. I can't really think of anyone else that actually just has better pure boxing than him. And I think that Moreno can throw and land more volume. Moreno's a big time volume guy. He invests in the body early. He throws that jab quite a lot, which I do like think is something that is like one of his best tools, but it's something that at some points, honestly, it looks like he doesn't throw it enough, if you can believe it, because I know everyone talks about it, but I think there's also kind of something to talk about. But I think as well with Erceg, I would be surprised if Erceg can get Moreno down pretty consistently, because if you do watch the third fight between Moreno and Pantoja, the way that Pantoja was getting Brandon Moreno down to the ground, he had to blitz in, and that is how Pantoja really fights. Pantoja's a blitzing guy. He applies a lot of pressure. He throws a lot of volume. He honestly does a little bit of the Juliana Pena, where he like looks down and just throws combos and dives into takedowns. But Erceg doesn't have that style, man. He's gonna have to kind of try and fight from range and then work takedowns from there if he wants to get them. So I don't know. I feel like it'll be a tough kind of fight for Erceg to close the distance against Moreno's jab. And then on top of that as well, I think that even in the striking and the pure striking, I do think that Moreno is going to be the more high volume guy here. And I like Moreno to win the fight by decision over Steve Erceg. So let me know what you think. I know that there's a couple of guys out there wanting to pick Steve Erceg, so if that's you, let me know why. But I do honestly think this is a pretty good matchup for Brandon Moreno. As I said, coming off a good performance against Albazi. Before that, lost that fight to Royval. And before that, lost, of course, to Pantoja. But I think if Moreno does win this one against Erceg, we're going to have to start having some very uncomfortable conversations about, do we just do Brandon Moreno versus Pantoja? Do they fight for the fourth time? Oh my goodness, that would be funny. But it turns out the word on the street, the rumor is, it could be Kyoji Horiguchi versus Alejandro Pantoja. So, I guess UFC's trying to take everyone from Ryzen and the PFL to challenge Pantoja, because, as I said, Pantoja's beating literally everyone. Pantoja's beaten both of these guys, and he's beaten Moreno 3 times. I mean, who has Pantoja not beaten at 125? Aside from Makayev and, forgot his name, Askarov or something. Askarov. Anyway, Moreno's the pick. I think Moreno gets it done over 5 rounds. I think we do see this fight go the distance, to be honest. I think it does go all 5, but I think it's going to be Moreno. It's kind of doing the good work. So let me know what you think in the comments below. A little poster review. A good poster. Pretty solid poster. I would like to know if this pattern in the background is like a Mexican pattern or anything, because if not, I think it probably is a bit of a wasted opportunity. You know, I think they really kind of done something like a little bit cultural. But if it is a Mexican pattern, then that's pretty sick. But I think that, yeah, that just kind of did what they could with what they have, because you don't have like an incredible co-main event to slap on that poster. Because I think there's a pay-per-view coming up with like a nuts poster that's like one of the best posters we've seen. I think it's this one here. I love this poster. This is awesome. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.